Gemara. Today's daf is daf Yud Beis. We're actually up on Beis at the bottom of the page, and we learned in the Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah that a city that has Avodah Zarah, the neighboring parts are permitted, but to work with and to interact with, but not in the city itself. And then we said that if you have a road, if the only place it comes to an end that the city not allowed to go, and the pastors by Rashain over here is because it appears that you're going to worship other idols. But if that road goes beyond the city, then you can't travel that road. So we said the first version was what's considered outside of the city, how close or how far away. So we said, for example, in Aza, the marketplace, which is really adjunct to it. Now there's another version. Ikidabri, 2 lines from the bottom of the page of your Aleph Amud base. Ikidabri, that was to say, what exactly would it didn't be regarding that marketplace neighboring Aza? Have you ever gone to the city of Tyre? But you saw over there Yidden. This is what Chanina's answer was. You saw over there the Yidden were so close to each other, at the same time, that they were both cooking on the same stove. The Chachamim didn't intervene. They didn't feel there was a problem. So there was an issue possibly, but they said it wasn't an issue. And we're going to have three, and the same thing over here. So we're going to have 3 different views as to how far we say that they had no issues. Even questions which are ma'atayda, which even strong suspicions with the Rabbanan, or only when it comes to a light suspicion, they weren't very careful with. But if it's a strong suspicion, they were particularly careful, and the same could be here, as we'll see. Because it could be not go to the city at all. It could be that that you're not allowed to deal with them at all. It could be only 3 days before you're not allowed to deal with them. Sorry, only the day of the holiday itself. Or it could be that the only time that we were lenient with them is the 3 days before. So either only lenient with them the 3 days before, which is the smallest Isser, or we're lenient with them on the day of the festival itself, which was being, as we'll see. Says the Gemara, version number 1. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, what might have been concerned, but they weren't. We're talking about, concern is they're making treif, you're making kosher, and maybe when you're turning around, they'll drop a piece of treif into your pot. So we don't say Dilma Mahadar Api Yisrael Achayda. Maybe the Eid will turn around, and the guy might toss in a piece of treif. In other words, there's a question mehat here, that there might be a possible Isa Mahatira, and the Chachamim discounted, they weren't worried. The Kavasa, the same thing, Hachanam here too. The Chachamim were not worried. So there's an Isa Deraisa, Pasi Deraisa, and the Chachamim were not worried. Same thing over here. The Chachamim are not worried, should you're allowed to even sell them products and get their money. Now there's a possibility that this money is tainted. Now this money might have been money that was offered to Avodah Zarah, or was an exchange of an animal for Avodah Zarah. So then this money will be Asa Mahatayda. We're not even worried about an Isa Mahatayda because it's not so commonplace. That's Abaye's version. That's how far we say we're not worried, because it's not in the city, it's outside the city. Robert says, no, that's going way too far. But with that, you're definitely not allowed to. You're not allowed to buy, sell. You're not allowed to sell them and take their money, because maybe it is Avodah Zarah. It's so close to that city, and we're not going to allow that. So what are we allowing in that Luza Shalaza? Only an Isa de Rabbanon. So what happened when 2 people cook in the same pot? What Isa de Rabbanon? Could there have been the Chumma? We didn't worry about it. So same thing here. Isa de Rabbanon, Yom Edom, is to deal with them on Yom Edom, not with taking their money, but to deal with them. Edom, not worried. Rabbi said, "My lochashav chachamim." So he's bishul over gechavim. The goy, the goy might turn the fire on and might be bishul akum. So there's an Isa de Rabbanon there, but we're not worried. The kavasa, the same thing here. Hachinami lo chashav chacham. The chacham not worried. No, it was in Abaye's case of the 2 pots. That's totally different. Of course, we're not worried. Why would the guy put a piece of treif into the Yiddish pot? Doesn't make sense. Why would he do it? Especially if he gets caught, he can get in trouble. But there's a possibility of bishalakum. So the guy might turn the fire on and cook. We're not worried. So the same thing here is by Avodah Zarah. Since you're not in the city, you're outside the city, you're the marketplace next to the city. On the day of the festival, that whatever you do, they are going to praise their gods and everything else, or use it for the festival. That's only Issa de Rabbanan. So since you're outside of the city, we're no longer worried. Rabbi Barula says, no. we are still worried about Yom Edom, but we're not worried about Bishul Akim. You know why I'm not worried about Bishul Akim? Because in order to count the Bishul Akim, all you have to do is in the middle make the fire bigger, or toss it over, do anything minimal, and it removes a bit of Bishul Akim. So that's why the Rabbanim weren't worried. Masha Ein Kain, when it comes to Yom Edom, definitely it's neighboring the city. It's adjunct to the city. Of course, we're worried. So what aren't we worried about? We're not worried about when you're cooking treif right next to kosher. The guy is cooking his treif. Maybe something was splatter. Maybe something was splatter out, which is a shash only the rabbanim. We're not worried. Because it's a very slight chash. Why slight chash? Because even if it does happen, definitely be bottle b'shishim. So there's no, the little amount that splatters of the treif into the kosher is so minimal that it'll be nullified. So the same thing here is, what aren't we concerned in the marketplace of Azab, which is adjunct to the city, is we are not worried about the 3 days prior, which is a very small chash. And there we're not going to be worried. But everything else we are worried. Okay, that was yesterday's Gemara. Now the Gemara says, are you allowed to go to the city? Let's say there's a city there's a city full of Avodah Zarah. Are you allowed to go there on the road? And we said it depends. If the road ends in that city, you're not allowed to because of a chash. Or if the road goes via the city somewhere else, then you're permitted to go because we're not going to be chayshish. People will assume that you're probably using the road just to go to the next destination. Says the Gemara, Tandur Rabbanon, we learn, eat a city. Yes, also the chametz you're not allowed to go in there, and a maid holds you're not allowed to even use it to go to another. You're not allowed to go into the city. Obviously, people will be chayshid, that they'll think that you're going to the city not to talk to somebody, but rather to join them in their festivities or to join them and worship the idols. And but nor can you go to another city. We're still chayshid. Even a maid. And the Chachamim, I mean, Kozman, Shahaderech Miyuchedes Loisim Makim, the only destination that this road takes you to, it's to that city than us. But Ein Haderech Miyuchedes Loisim Makim, but if the road is not just dedicated to that city, it continues onwards, then Mutta, you are permitted, we're not going to be Chayshish. You're not going to be Chayshish. Interesting that the Rishalmi has a different virtue altogether, the Nafmis Halach as well. The Rishalmi says that you're not allowed to, the reason why you're not allowed to go to the city is not because of Chayshit, you're worshipping idols. It's because of the covet you're giving to the idols. The more people that spend their time in that city, it's an idol city, people think, it looks like, it doesn't matter what people think, it looks like you're giving covet to the Avodah Zarah, because they're Am Hadras. So therefore, that's why you're not allowed to go. And then after Minul Halach, as I talked about in the Achrayim, everything else is if you're allowed to go to a church and go through as a shortcut through the church to go to another place. According to Al Gemara Chshad, since the shortcut everyone knows takes you to the next place, then you're allowed to. But according to the vote of cover, the fact is that in their courtyard there are more people hanging around, then you're not allowed to. And if you're allowed to use their hall, their wedding hall of a church, is there a problem or not? If Chshad never knows there's a wedding hall, they know. If the vort is covered, it's covered because you're more people using their facilities, and so on. Let's say that you have what do you call a splinter came into you right before Avodah Zarah. Don't bend down to remove it because the appearances because our Gemara learns the problem is chshat. It appears that you're bowing down to Avodah Zarah. We know Chana's 7 sons. The 7th one just had to pick up the ring. It looks like you're doing Avodah Zarah, and that's forbidden as well. If it doesn't look like it, the Gemara doesn't say what that means. It is then permitted. Next case is you drop coins in front of Avodah Zarah. The only way to pick it up is by bending down. Lo yishha the yitlam. Don't bend down to pick up your coins. It appears that you're worshiping Avodah Zarah. But the main, if it doesn't appear so, then mutter is permitted. What does it mean? Neither Gemara will explain. Let's say you have a spring that comes up right in front of Avodah Zarah, and you want to drink. Lo yishha the yishha. Don't bend down to drink. It appears that you're worshipping Avodah Zarah. Again, remain in need, if it doesn't appear so much is permitted. Partsufis, they have these statues where the water goes in one place and the water comes out, let's say, from the mouth, and people would drink from that. Hamikalchim mayim bekrochim, in the large cities where they can afford these monuments, and they produce water as if that they are the source of the generosity. So on, don't place your mouth on it. So in the case of the spring, you take your hands and you take the water and you put it in your mouth. Here you place your mouth directly onto wherever the source of the water, in one of these orifices, the yeast and drink it. And they should need to come and appear that you're kissing the Avodah Zarah, which is a step less than bowing down and prostrating and worshiping Avodah Zarah. Nevertheless, you're not allowed to. The same thing. Now we're talking about not placing your mouth directly onto the source of the water. Don't place your mouth directly onto a pipe that's coming through the ground. The yeast and drinking as a sakana. What the sakana is, the Gemara will explain soon. Let's first understand my need if it doesn't appear so. What do you mean? That nobody sees you. So what's the relevance of that? We laid down the famous rule. Wherever the Chachamim forbade because it appears so, I feel even and Taisus included a samach over there in the bottom. There's a whole discussion by whether by isurim derabbanon we apply the same thing, but maybe only by isurim deraisa we say that maris ayin is also afil b'chad chadorim. But if it's merely an isur derabbanon, then maybe there is no problem of maris ayin. So discussion a little bit here as well. But anyway, bottom line is Ein Nida cannot mean that nobody sees you because it's irrelevant. If it looks like you're worshiping Avodah Zarah, which we isur deraisa, then it's also wherever you are. Ella aim say im einoi nida kimishtach v'lav yucham. If it doesn't appear, you do it in a way that doesn't look like you're kneeling. It doesn't look like you're worshiping the Avodah Zarah. Then it is permitted. Now, the one asks a question. The principle is all the same. It's so many cases there. The principle is if it looks like you're worshiping Avodah Zarah, it's us. If it doesn't, it doesn't. What do you have to give us all these examples? With tzricha, we need each example, as the Gemara explains. The Tanakh, if we only do the case of a splinter, and we would say don't bow down, it's very simple. Tak, it's painful, everything else, but you have to stand right there by Avodah Zarah and remove your principle, move a couple of feet away, and remove it there. That's why we don't allow you. Go forward. And remove it there. When it comes to money, you have the money fell right in front of Avodah Zarah. Maybe then you're allowed to. Even though it appears you're worshiping Avodah Zarah, but then maybe people will see the money there. They'll think there's a possibility that you're not worshiping, but you pick up the money. And so maybe, and also you have no choice. We would have thought so. That's why we have to tell you the din about money. No, so just tells the din about money. Now, I would say, money. So you forfeit your money. Sorry, you can't go bend down, you lose your money. Or because the side of when it comes to splinter, you can't just forget about it because it's there and it's painful. Maybe ain't malay. Maybe we don't really care where you remove it. So therefore, you have to tell you both cases are forbidden. In both these cases, there's no real sakana. That's worse. It's just pain. So therefore, we just allow you to stand there and to to appear like you're worshiping Avodah Zarah. Avo maya and the iko sakana, but by maya, it could be a sakana. It could be you're dying from thirst. As Asher says, you might die from the thirst. Maybe no. Tzricha you need them because now when it comes to Avodah Zarah, the three Avedas, these are three Avedas that you have to go yaver. And we learned according to Moses, like even the showing the past, even Abizrayu, even for some mammals directly Avodah Zarah, but the tangents of Avodah Zarah is also forbidden. That's awesome. No, so Partsufas normally, what is the case of the Partsufas? In the case of the statues where they have the water coming out of different orifices, you're right. That isn't necessary. But because we want to segue to the next part, which is totally unrelated, nothing to do with Marasayim, but rather to do with Sakana. How do we segue from Marasayim to Sakana? So therefore, we brought in this case that don't go ahead and drink water directly from the statue. And once we told you can't do it because of Marasayim, then we segue also, by the way, you don't drink from the Sakana. Don't place your mouth on a pipe. But you should drink in the Sakana because of Sakana. That's why we brought it in. So you want to my Sakana. But if it would only tell us this case, you wouldn't know about the spring because over here, you're placing your mouth directly on the orifice. You don't see what's coming through there for sakana. In the case of the spring, you're using both hands. So therefore, we would have thought that maybe you're allowed to. Says the Gemara, my sakana, aluka. So aluka is a leech. In fact, there might be a leech over there which is very dangerous. Talking about Milan, like used to Adam Maya, a person that drink water, lemon, a hot, left from the river, lemon, got from the pool's limit period, not with the mouth, not with one hand. When you do one hand, because you're scared you're losing all your water, you straight away throw it into your mouth. You don't have a chance to inspect it. But if you did drink the water directly with one hand or even placing your mouth, then you take responsibility for yourself with sakana. Because what? Because you're endangering your own life. My sakana haluka. The danger of having a leech, swallowing a leech, and internally they can start eating inside your veins and sapping out your blood, and you kill you. Like the Gemara says, and this supports the view of Chanina. If somebody swallows a leech from the water, on Shabbos, you're allowed to do Shabbos to heat up the water. Why? Because when you're heating up the water, then what do you call it? The heating of the water somehow or another prevents or kills maybe the aluka, so therefore you won't be in danger. And this is mamash sakonish nefashis. When incident happened once, somebody swallowed this bleach. The heated Rab Nechemia, and Rab Nechemia permitted lahachim lechamin b'Shabbos. That was Rab Chanina told lahachim lechamin b'Shabbos to heat up water on Shabbos because sakonish nefashis. It takes time. It takes a few minutes to heat up the water. And in the meantime, how are you going to survive? Because the leech is dangerous and instantly can kill you. In the meantime, and this is only to stall the danger, that doesn't in any way cure it, ligoma chala, drink essig, drink vinegar. And the vinegar sort of stymies the leech inside you. And no matter what, the vinegar itself can cause harm, but nothing comparable to what the leech can do. So that is going to prevent the leech from continuing doing what it's doing. In the meantime, you can heat up the water. So it's mamash sakana. So that's why you shouldn't drink the water from these pipes without first going through a filter or something, or putting your hands in and inspecting it. I'm going to read about over in Haiman, the ball is a boot, or somebody swallows a bee, internally and it's alive, you're not going to survive. Miu, however, just to live a little longer, you should drink a levias, a very strong vinegar. Maybe you'll live a little bit, enough time to come home. At the mafkid besa, you can give last will and testament, you can give your last instructions before you die, because there's nothing that is going to save you. Wow. Well, you said the mind, but you should not drink water at night for different. Now we're not talking about what Rashi said. We're not talking about here from a pipe. From anywhere. Don't drink water. You drank. Don't be beroisha. It's you're at fault. Why? Sakana. You're endangering your life. What sakana are we talking about here? My sakana. What's sakana? You're drinking water from a reservoir forever. What's sakana? Sakana's shavridi. That there is a shindala. There's a demon that's in charge of making people blind, and there's a sakana of that. In fact, some people have a custom. Every cup of water they drink, before they drink it, they tip over a little bit of the water. It's like kodesh avridi. If you did drink it, maitakante, how do you prevent this shindala, this demon, from doing its work? So he says, there's another person there in the room, even though the person's asleep because it's nighttime. It's only at nighttime. Then wake him up. And say to that person, I'm thirsty for water. The shindala hears that, it'll go away. The Eloi, there's nobody else there but you. You have to trick the Shindala in believing there's somebody else there. So Nikarkish Benichtama Chatzra, you go ahead and you bang one lid against another, like the sound of cymbals. The name you not took aloud to yourself, but the Shindal will think you're talking to somebody else. Planya Bar Palisa, that this person is the son of this woman. Amrulach Imet, your mother says to you, he's dire, be careful, Bishavaride, Baride is some kind of a chant, an incantation. You take the name and you reduce it so that it reduces its influence until eventually it disappears. Yire Ri, because and use white glasses. And you say, and drink it in white glass. Somehow or another, that incantation is going to prevent the Shavridi from having its effect. The Mishnah continues on the same theme we had before. What happens before we learned about a city with Avodah Zarah? What about the neighboring parts? What about those even adjunct to the city? What about? So it depends. If it's mamish, the marketplace of the city, we have three opinions how far we're going to be lenient because it's outside the city on the one hand, but it's so close that the people of the city generally do all their business right there. So it's like it's not an extension of the city, but close enough to be an extension. So we had a machlekes, a bayirava, and how far we go. And the last opinion was the only thing that we are lenient with is the 3 days prior, but nothing more than that because there's so much activity taking place between the two. What about an Ida city? She yes, Barucham has a Avodah Zarah there. It had Avodah Zarah there, and they have a market day, and the day of their holiday. Interesting over here in the Western world, the day of the festival holiday, everything is shut. Over there, after they have a holiday, they open everything up and they have big market, big fairs, and so the question is if you're allowed to buy during those on that day because I guess have big sales and big activities happening. So it depends. You have over there some stores that are decorated with all kinds of fruits or fragrances. We'll see. Then you have other ones that are not decorated. What does that tell you? So the Mishnah says that actually happened in Beishon. We'll learn more chulun what's a special Beishon beginning. The Chacham say those stalls that are decorated, then asuras are also receiving a later. Why? Because obviously they're celebrating the day. But they're not decorated, then mutaris, then they are mutar because there's those that are decorated pay they give a percentage of whatever the income they get on that day towards Avodah Zarah. So you're actually being mahana or you're supporting Avodah Zarah. And we'll talk about if you're allowed to be mahana Avodah Zarah or not. Mashenki, if they're not decorated, they don't pay taxes to Avodah Zarah. So that's the issue about directly paying Avodah Zarah. But the question then is, what about Yom Edom? We said before, you're not allowed to buy and sell. So what's going on over here? You're allowed to buy and sell there. So Rashi explains here that the only thing you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to sell them an animal because they're going to go and use it for Avodah Zarah. And you're not allowed to buy from them perishables because they're so happy they got rid of it, so therefore they're going to go and give their thanks to Avodah Zarah. But you can buy on Yom Edom non-perishable because you took something away from them and it's not perishable. They could have waited later, could not sell it at all, and the only reason why they would sell it is probably because they need the money. So they're not being moided to the Avodah Zarah. Remember, we had a discussion a few days ago. The Gemara says Gemara. When we say decorated, we only mean decorated with vetted vahadas. The problem is when you have roses and you have myrtles, they will have good fragrances. So, know what the issue is? When you're walking in there, you are having hana from things that are going to be used for Avodah Zarah. In other words, these fragrances is a sign that these stores are dedicated they belong to the church, and the money go directly to the church. And these things that they're decorating with are things that they use for Avodah Zarah and have good fragrances. So you're having right now hana from these fragrances. So as the you're having hana from these fragrances, and they used to spread it out in front of Avodah Zarah to create a good, nice ambiance. Avo mutaras bepetis is stamp decorated with fruits and vegetables, which are things which are not used for Avodah Zarah. Mutaras, you're allowed to walk into these stalls and buy from them. When you're buying from these stalls, you're giving them money and it's going, and you're giving them hanot Avodah Zarah. We, according to Shlakish, we don't care. You're allowed to be mahana Avodah Zarah from to Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed to have hana from Avodah Zarah. So is you're not allowed to take hana from them, but you're allowed to give them hana. My time, what's forbidden is having hana, but giving them hana shari. That is permitted. Comes along Rabbi Yochanan and he says, I'm forget. Even if it's decorated with fruits. So you're not having a hana on the receiving end because it doesn't really have any fragrance. Nami yasser. If you're not allowed to, you agree, you're not allowed to have any hana from Avodah Zarah. Mahana like koshkein. So giving hana to Avodah Zarah surely should be yasser. And why giving hana? Because Rashi says in one pshat, because they owned these stalls. All the stalls that were opened on the day of the Avodah Zarah was actually owned by the church. So any profits that they make go directly to the church. So therefore, you're being mahana, or that they give money towards the church.